We're now being joined by the spokesperson of the Senate, Senator Ajibola Bashiru. Thank you so much, distinguished, for joining us tonight on the program. And it would appear that the president have actually had his way, with the withholding of his accent to that bill. But let's start with, what are the options now available, really, to the National Assembly?
I think, thank you for raising the issue, but it's first and foremost, we should not see this issue as a fighting match between the National Assembly and Mr. President. Section 58 of the Nigerian Constitution emphasizes a collaboration in the lawmaking process by the National Assembly and the President, and that is why there is a requirement for assent of the President. Of course, subsection 5 of Section 58 also allow the National Assembly by a majority of 2/3 of each of the houses to also repass the legislation if we so desire. So that needs to be clear. It's not a case of somebody having a way or the other having a way. And you can also see from the letter written by Mr. President to the National Assembly, he wrote a 19-paragraph letter seeking to convince the National Assembly why the issue of direct primary should be reconsidered by the National Assembly. For a president that in his communication is rather very laconic, very frugal with words, for him to have been able to go elaborately to do that, it shows that he has some high respect and regard for the thinking of the National Assembly and trying to engage us in intellectual discussion as to the rationale or otherwise for his refusal of the assent. It could have just been that I refuse assent, but he did not just do that. He put pen to paper with a 19-paragraph. I think that will be about the longest correspondence that the Nigerian president have had with the National Assembly. And for a legislation that is about 158 section, for there to be only issue about a section, I think the National Assembly should be commended, as well as organizations like INEC and international partners that have worked assiduously in the past years on the INEC bill. And just about your question about options, we have about 4 options that we are considering in terms of dealing with the issue of refusal of assent. And if our time permits, I'm able to give you those options that is on board.
Okay, Senator Bashiru, I like the way you've started, but yes, time will permit, because we want to go on a short break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation. It's time for a short break. Do stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching Newsnight here on Arise News. I am Amaka Uday.
And I am Christian Ogodo. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
Well, we still have the spokesperson of the Senate with us. That's Senator Ajibola Bashiru. Thank you so much again for being here. And of course, before we went on that break, you were trying to give us the 4 options now available to
the Senate or the National Assembly.
Yeah, the first option is to decide to go the way of previous sessions of the National Assembly. Whenever the president refuses assent, we just put the legislation in the cooler and then wait for another legislative assembly. But that option, I don't believe, is an option that the 9th Assembly will consider, because a lot of effort had gone into the issue of making this bill a reality. A 158 section bill, we cannot afford to put it in the cooler because of a section. And that is, therefore, I find it very comical when I saw the gentleman saying he belongs to COP and saying that it's a conspiracy because of electronic voting. I don't think some people even understand what has been the provision on transmission of results in the new electoral bill. It is very revolutionary, and nobody, certainly not my political party, is afraid of free and fair and credible election. The second option is to interrogate the arguments that have been canvassed by Mr. President in rejecting the issue of direct primary. I will say not all those arguments are insurmountable. For instance, the argument on security is neither here nor there. If we want to take the argument on issue of security to its logical conclusion, it will may well be that we will say that there will not be 2023 election because there was insecurity in certain area. Then on the question of the cost, I think the cost is rather fallacious. It is not based on any empirical analysis, and there is no hard fast rule as to what will be the mode to be done. But nonetheless, since the president had advanced a certain argument, the National Assembly may look at that and see whether we'll be convinced to say, okay, the president, the argument you have canvassed, even if not all of them are tenable, maybe 1 or 2 of them are tenable, then we could reconsider our position to allow that argument to sail. The other option is for us as a National Assembly to look at the issue in a fresh, new manner in view of the experience that we have now had interacting with the executive position and consulting with Nigerians, and what will be a most democratic way by which nomination of candidates and the fears that really impel us to go to adopt direct primary in the first instance, how could it be met within the context of an amendment of the relevant provision. Of course, the fourth option will be to invoke section 50 subsection 5 of section 58 by ensuring that we override the veto of Mr. President. I know some people who believe National Assembly is a combative association, or in their own concern, they're only looking at that option. But we have four options. But as a National Assembly that is sworn to uphold the Nigerian Constitution, that is committed to a legislative agenda that works for Nigeria, we will look at any of these four options and decide to take the one that is best suited for the advancement of democratic process in Nigeria.
Very well said, Senator Bashiru. But why, some Nigerians are wondering that the Senate has backed down. I mean, in the face of these four options that you had a closed-door session. You must have reached some conclusions even before the House of Representatives went on recess. The chairman of the National Assembly is the president of the Senate. He could have prevailed on the House of Reps, say, look, tarry a while because of the importance of this Electoral Act or Electoral Amendment Bill. So why did the Senate back down?
I think first and foremost, it's not a question of backing down. As at the time we were sitting and having our executive session yesterday on the issue of the Electoral Act, the House had gone on recess. We did not even know. We sat at different chambers and we don't monitor what happened in one chamber or the other. So first and foremost, as at the time we were adjourning yesterday, the House of Representatives had actually gone on recess. Then on the issue of backing down, you see, the National Assembly is an assembly that is created by law and the Constitution. There is a Court of Appeal decision as to the mode of overriding the President's veto, and that is the case of National Assembly and the President. Justice Ogutade Court of Appeal decision delivered that judgment to the effect that for you to override the veto is not by resolution. You must pass the legislation again with two-thirds majority of each of the houses. And when you want to pass a legislation, that means that you have first reading, second reading, and the third reading in that regard. Anything short of complying with passage. In fact, the issue in that particular case, Court of Appeal Authority, was that a resolution was purportedly passed by about 52 senators and I think about 165 House of Representatives members, purportedly overriding the veto of the president. The Court of Appeal said no, overruling the judgment of the lower court. First, in terms of quorum, it's not the quorum of the particular sitting. It is the entire membership of the National Assembly that will constitute quorum for determining the two-thirds majority in issue. Then secondly, it is not just by a resolution, but it must be by a solemn procedure of going through passage of legislation. And in the face of that Court of Appeal decision, some of us who are in the National Assembly were also legal practitioner as our second address. So we cannot see a legislation and say because you want to let, for instance, listeners of Arise TV to be very happy, you want to say you want to pass a resolution without complying with the procedure. Then if it's a two-chamber approach, as at the time we were taking our own decision this morning, the House of Representatives had gone on recess. So even if we had passed any law today, we still have to wait till 18. Is it not better to see that we have even option beyond overriding? For those who said we back down, they are only looking as if the only option is that of overriding the veto. But I've told you, we have four options. And as a representative of the people, we have to consider this option, consult with experts, consultant, constituent, civil society organizations, even INEC, as to how best we'll be able to do so. The National Assembly, we have set a standard. We are not an ego-seeking institution. We are not interested in unnecessarily eating the polity. We are interested in arriving at resolutions of any problem, and that is the attitude we have taken to all our legislation. The President Muhammadu Buhari Act would have become intractable, were able to pass it. The Company Allied Matter Act, the Bank and Other Financial Institution Act, and many other impactful legislation were passed with necessary consultation, both with the executive and also the necessary stakeholder. Just in this instance too, all our 4 options were put it in the public domain. We're going to consult widely on it and be able to take the final option that we're going to take.
And in your view, I like how you talk about this thing. So I can tell that you've actually consulted widely with your colleagues. So one wonders, you know, from that interactions that you've had, what likely would be the option that the Senate especially would take? That's one question. And also the issue of time. The 2023 election is just around the corner. The Senate President has said that they are consulting with the House of Representatives before we know the next step to take. Are you not worried about the time? Because 2019, the President withheld his assent because of the issue of time. He says the bill was coming too close to the election.
I don't have power of clairvoyance, so I will not know what will be the thinking of 109 senators and 360 House of Representatives members. But what I can tell you is that the Electoral Act, the impactful provision of Electoral Act, will not be allowed to be swept under the carpet, irrespective of whatever option we're going to take. But I cannot, and I must be very sincere with myself, I tell you that I know what the options will be taken by 360 and 109 person. But I'm sure that the National Assembly is committed to having an Electoral Act that will ensure integrity of our election in 2023. And there's time. January 18 is just around the corner, and passing the bill, just as we have done, we have passed a bill, impactful bill on deep offshore and profit sharing contract within a week. This National Assembly is committed to passing the Electoral Act, but we are not on collision course with anybody, and nobody will allow us to be on collision course with anybody.
All right. I think it's a very great place here to submit all, I would say, resolutions of the Senate and see how that is married with that of the House of Representatives, because the expectations of Nigerians are very high on, an enduring democracy in this country. Senator Ajibola Bashiru is the spokesman of the Nigerian Senate. Thanks so very much for joining us on Newsnight.